Welcome to the Product Builders Podcast. This is your host, Mark Garcia, and on the show today, we have Mitch Goldenberg joining us. Mitch is the Director of Physical Access at Veridas, which develops and provides biometric solutions based on artificial intelligence. Mitch, welcome to the show today. How's everything going?
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here. I consider it an honor. I've listened to the show and enjoyed some of your previous guests. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I threw out words like biometrics and artificial intelligence, but that introduction does not do anyone any justice. So to kick things off, can you tell us a bit more about Veridas? Give us that elevator pitch about what the company does and the solutions you offer.
Sure. Mark, before I do that, maybe I'll just share a little bit about myself to give your listeners sort of an idea of where I am and what I do. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, with my wife of 25 years. We have 2 Labrador retrievers that we love. We live near the beach, about 15 minutes, so we enjoy going to the beach. I love taking my Harley Davidson out on long rides down sort of the oak-covered windy roads of Charleston. I've been in the tech hardware space for about 10 years. I love learning new skills, new thought processes, new ideas. I am a person of faith, and I love God, and I serve him with everything I've got. So a little bit about Veridas. Veridas are identity experts and digital security scientists who are all committed to applying biometric recognition innovations to ensure that all people enjoy the right to use their real identities to move freely through what really we believe is a highly connected digital and physical world. Now, what the platform does, the platform itself identifies people. And we do this digitally by scanning typically a government-issued ID, like a driver's license or a passport, and then comparing that to a live selfie taken either inside of a native app or on a desktop computer. We then use that identity to verify that you are who you say you are.
That's great. Thank you for that introduction. And so I mentioned your role, Director of Physical Access. Can you also touch on what your responsibilities are and what you do for the company?
Sure. We are a U.S. kind of startup, so I wear a lot of hats. We've been in business for about 10 years, mostly in Spain and in parts throughout Europe. But I manage our partnership relations for the physical access control. So screening potential partners who are looking to use our solution. I mainly spend a lot of my time explaining how facial and voice biometrics work. I also show our potential partners how we differentiate ourselves in the market. I walk companies through our partnership journey. And then post-agreement, or once we partner, I then turn to the education side and I train and I help onboard new partners and their technical sales teams.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. We talk about biometrics, and I feel like we hear that word a lot, but a lot of people don't fully understand what goes into it and all the nitty-gritty of biometrics. And I think about it in my own life. We've got facial recognition on the iPhone, or when you go to the airport, there's Clear, which also uses biometrics to secure your identity or confirm it. Mm-hmm. Can you get into the nitty-gritty of how biometrics works and all the different nuances of it?
Well, I'm not a technical expert, Mark, but let me take a good shot. To me, as I understand it, there are 5 basic components to biometrics. One is enrollment, feature extraction, template creation, storage and comparison, and finally, matching and decision making. Let me break those down for you. Let's start with enrollment. This is where an individual's biometric data is captured and recorded in a secure system. And I'm talking about biometrics overall. This could be fingerprint, it could be voice, it could be palm vein. Then there's feature extraction. And this is where specific features or characteristics are isolated and then extracted. And what that is then done, that's used to create a unique digital representation of a biometric trait, like a face or a voice. And then that's turned into a template. And that brings us to the template creation. What happens there is the extracted features are converted into a mathematical vector file. Most people don't know that. Finally, or next, we have storage comparison. And that's where the generated template is securely stored in a database or on a device. And when authentication is required, the biometric data of an individual is captured again. Then the newly generated capture is compared against the stored template to find a match. And finally is the match and the decision. This is the comparison process involving different algorithms to measure the similarity between the newly captured biometric template that we talked about and the stored template. If the degree of similarity in those two things exceeds, let's say, a predefined threshold, a match is made and the individual is successfully authenticated, as we call it. Let me try and break it down in a little bit simpler fashion, Mark. It all starts with enrolling a person. And that's almost like a constant when you're thinking in scientific experimental terms. I'm no scientist, but I remember back in high school and college, I remembered what a constant was. And what that was that's the part of you that doesn't change over time, like your fingerprints, your palm veins, or your iris, when you mention clear, your voice or your face. Now, you might say, well, Mitch, my face changes almost every year as I get older, or I can grow a beard, or I can suddenly need glasses. Well, those facial features might change, but what we are capturing is a mathematical configuration of your face. And I can get a little deeper into that later, but we're basically taking a measurement, let's say from the bridge of your nose to the middle of your eye, or the edge of your nose to your ear. Those things rarely change over a 25, 30, or 35-year gap, right? So then finally, the mathematical configuration is unique to you. Then it's encrypted by vendors like Veridas. Once you onboard or enroll that person, you're simply then comparing your constant to what is presented to a device. In our case, a camera or a voice through a telephone.
I love that breakdown. That makes it really easy to understand the whole process, which I'm sure is much more complicated than what you've just gone into. So what are some of the applications of the technology of Veridas? We mentioned Clear. What are the other use cases, and where are we seeing this kind of biometric technology being implemented?
Well, there are several different forms of biometrics. As I mentioned above, there's iris, right? Or the taking of a mathematical measurement of the iris inside your eye. By the way, that's not our technology. Our technology is face. Then there's fingerprint, which is probably the most widely used biometric in law enforcement, right? Because the FBI has that database of everyone's fingerprint. Then there's palm vein, which I'm told that no two people in the world have the same palm vein structure in their hand. And of course, we've been talking about facial recognition, which is our core competency. And by the way, we are top rated in the world by the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for a 1 to 12 million accuracy rating. By the way, that's the hardest test that the NIST offers, is the 1 to 12 million. And of course, there's voice, which is gaining in popularity. And what we've been doing is using machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, to perfect our voice biometrics against the deep fake attacks You may have heard recently in the news that there's been some of those going around. However, our voice biometric is ranked #1 in the world, and it's never been successfully hacked or faked.
That's great. One of the questions I had that I definitely wanted to dig into was the challenges of biometrics. And since you brought up like deep fakes, I'd love to just go ahead and dive into that now. So, are there other challenges you face aside from deep fake? I'm sure um, there are a bunch of common challenges with just the end user and getting people adopting the technology. Can you speak a little bit more about what you're seeing on your end?
Ah, yes. We finally get to the big idea, right? Privacy and fear. And I like to look at it like this, Mark. From the beginning of time, quite simply put, people fear what they don't understand. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking to you today. As I alluded to earlier, our company creates a mathematical vector from the image of a person's face. Mind you, we're not taking a picture and storing a person's picture, right? They have Facebook and TikTok and Instagram for all that if you want to see people's faces. We don't do that. We take that image and we turn it into a vector file. And then we do a verification. And that's done in an AWS, Amazon Web Services cloud. And then we deliver the data to the company that's asked for it and that's licensed our product. And then once we deliver that information to the company, we actually delete that file from the cloud. So we are compliant with all international standards of how to handle a person's data. As far as accuracy, you could get better than ours, but we are 99.9% accurate. That's pretty good as I remember math to be. And that's as rated also by the NIST, right? And of course we know, well, not everybody knows this, but the NIST is governed by the United States Department of Commerce. We're also certified by the GDPR, which is the most stringent data regulation in the world, more stringent than the CCP in California and the BIPA regulations in Chicago, the GDPR. We're also iBeta Level 2 certified against a PAD. And what a PAD is a presentation attack detection. And that makes us compliant with the ISO certification 30.107.
Great. So security and privacy sounds like you got the gamut covered on your end. Can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, the verification process? And what I mean by that is how accurate is the technology, things like inclusivity and how biometrics adapt to just diverse populations, right? Different skin tones, ethnicities, etc. How does the technology like Veridas adapt and accommodate for those different types of things we see in the population?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And we have been perfecting that for about 10 years now. We were formed as a company by one of the largest banks in Europe. They were having challenges with successfully onboarding banking users to verify their identities when opening a bank account. We have successfully hit over 100 million verifications, and we average about 1 million more every week. So what does that really mean? Well, every verification and authentication that is done, that adds yet another brick to the proverbial wall of building the best facial biometric engine in the world. Because every time there's an authentication, our machine learns a little bit more about different complexions and skin tone challenges. In the beginning, I'll admit, from what I'm told, I wasn't with the company 10 years ago. There were some challenges many years ago, but over the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen virtually no challenges when it comes to the diverse population that we've seen, again, because of these millions and millions and millions of transactions that have made our technology smarter and smarter and smarter.
Great. And so, like any product, the more data you feed it, the more you're able to refine the process and really fine tune all the different aspects of that technology. So that makes a lot of sense. Um, Similarly, speaking of challenges and feeding data and getting more people into that system, how do you address the challenge of people feeling scared of biometrics, right? I feel like there's this whole conversation of I don't want to be scanned or I don't want to give up this information because it's being collected. And there can be a fear behind providing some of this information. So, how do you educate your users or the end users that this is a secure way and you're not giving away people's faces to other companies?
Yeah, like I explained a little earlier, good question. We don't actually take a person's facial image. When we create that mathematical vector that I spoke of earlier, once that vector is created, it is literally an unbreakable file. No company, either Veridas or outside Veridas, has ever successfully broken into that file and tried to extract it or use it elsewhere. Another thing we do is when you enroll into our platform, let's say to use the technology to pay with your face, for example, that's one instance. But if you want to also gain access to a football stadium, that's a different instance. Those two instances don't share. So you can't just move from one platform to another. They're siloed, which means they're even more secure. And I think when people hear the word biometrics, they think DNA for some reason. They think that we're like extracting something from them. And certainly, in a way, we are with that vector file. But since there's nothing anybody can literally do with that vector file, there's really no security risk. And by the way, we're not taking anyone's DNA, right?
That's funny. I feel like that sentiment that it's taking your DNA is a very common thought amongst people who are just unfamiliar with the technology or who have any sort of apprehensions. So I definitely feel that. I probably, when it was a new technology, I felt the same way where I was like, well, what kind of information is this actually collecting about me?
Sure.
But what's interesting, you mentioned football stadiums going into arenas. So maybe you can speak a little bit about where your technology is being applied. So is it both physical environmental spaces as well as products like banking apps or websites, et cetera?
Yeah, we actually like to believe that facial recognition is the perfect balance between security and hospitality. It's lightning fast. Our systems recognize your face in 300 milliseconds. For those listening, that's really fast. Our technology is extremely accurate. We talked about 99.9%. And you can never forget your face, right? You can forget your phone, you can forget your access control card, you can forget your keys, but you can never forget your face. And you certainly can't forget your voice. Companies around the world today are using our technology to securely open up bank accounts, to gain access to some of the world's largest stadiums and venues, to book hotel rooms, to rent vehicles, and even, as I mentioned, to make payments all with their face. There really isn't an application that couldn't be used to make things faster and more secure.
Great. And that's really interesting. So, on my end, as a product builder and someone who specializes in apps and websites and whatnot, we always think of integrating new technologies to enhance user experiences. So, I love that note that you think or that you said biometrics is the perfect balance between security and hospitality. So, in your opinion, are there other benefits to just integrating this type of technology into apps or into just our experiences in life overall? You know, speed of identification, I can definitely identify as one. Do you have any other thoughts in terms of why would we want to see this become more widespread and integrated into our different platforms and different things in our life?
Yeah, I think the two applications that come to mind first are the banking application, again, which is where Veridas was born out of, and we serve in many banks throughout the world today. What we do is by using a person's facial biometric to compare it to their government issued ID. We've seen things like account takeover, also known as ATO, dramatically declining by verifying that person's real identity. We've seen insurance fraud minimized by verifying the fact that that is the person who is using the correct insurance. We have seen things like ticket fraud being reduced at major stadiums throughout the world. When you think about verifying a person's real identity, comparing it to their driver's license, the things we can also do with that once that verification is made and that identification is completed, we can run that person against a list of money launderers. It's called the AML, or anti-money laundering list. So we are protecting the world's literal economy and financial infrastructure against money laundering. And there are several other applications to do other functions, with sex offenders and the National Sex Offender Watch List. If there's an institution that wants to be careful about who they let in, like a school or a daycare, we are protecting companies like that against people that shouldn't be there.
You went ahead and answered one of the questions I was going to ask in terms of what are the future applications of biometrics. And that's really interesting to hear all the different ways we can integrate it into different aspects of our life for security.
Actually, I'd actually prefer you to ask that question, because I actually had something I wanted to say about the future of digital identity.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into that. What are the future applications? I know the technology is constantly evolving. The smarter it gets, the more you can do with it. So what do you see as the future of biometrics and how we can use it in smarter ways?
Yeah, Mark, I think the future is bright for biometrics. It's the only security feature that you own and maintain control over. Look at Apple, for example. Apple is one of the most secure companies in the world. You're probably familiar about their $1 million bounty they have out there for hackers. And what I believe is one of the single most secure consumer devices on the planet is the iPhone. Think about this. Just a few years ago, Apple went beyond a passcode. Remember the 9216, pick your 4-digit passcode. They went beyond that, and they instituted fingerprint biometrics. And of course, today, more than 250 million people use facial recognition biometrics to unlock their iPhones, which you alluded to earlier. And I believe that as people get more comfortable with devices like the iPhone, that we're going to see higher and higher adoption rates. And as people become more comfortable with the technology, I see us replacing those worn out, broken ID cards, and even in some cases, phones, with facial recognition for gaining access to airports, trains, data centers, casinos, and corporate buildings.
That's interesting. And I think when you talk about comfortable level or the comfort level of end users, I definitely can see this becoming more widespread. So even myself, I've started just using Face ID to unlock all of the different apps on my phone, my bank apps, etc. And if had you asked me that 3 years ago, I definitely was not using that technology as much as I am now. So as people get more used to it on consumer products like iPhones, it'll definitely be interesting to see how we can apply it in other situations, like you mentioned, like airport security or these other areas in our life where we become more comfortable and want to implement this technology for speed.
We both mentioned airports, Mark. I don't know if you know this, but about 2 weeks ago, the TSA, right, the folks who guard our airports, began using facial recognition instead of the typical driver's license scan. The TSA chose 25 regional airports, pretty much the 25 largest airports in 25 different states throughout our country, and they've been using it now for about 2 weeks. And from the news articles that I've read, it's going amazingly well.
I have actually not heard that. I'd be interested to learn more about it. Do you know what airports off the top of your head were they targeting?
I do believe Atlanta, Dallas. What I'll do is I'll certainly send you the link that I have to the. It was on CBS News, and it was a broadcast. It was a news broadcast on CBS News, and I'm happy to forward that over to you.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'm sure our audience, we can link out to these. They'd be interested in learning more about that. So thank you for sharing that information. And so you've been with Veridas for a while now. You've seen this technology grow. I'm kind of backing things out and wanting to learn more about your career. But what have been some of the most memorable moments so far as you've seen this technology improve and become more widespread?
Yeah, there's been a couple of highlights for me. Seeing the technology work and seeing the reaction on people's faces, they almost all have that same wow factor, right? So imagine for a second, I can't play you a video, but imagine walking up to a door and by looking in a camera within less than a second, that door opens up for you, or that turnstile opens up, or that gate opens up just for you. There's something very motivating and powerful about that. One of the other neat memories that I had is the CEO of Formula One tested out our technology and currently uses it. But when he first saw it, he said, "This is the future of mobility." He was absolutely floored by our technology. And we continue to floor people every day.
That's really great that you mentioned this wow moment. We actually had a podcast episode a few months back that talked about surprising and delighting your users. And I think that that sentiment is something that you can definitely relate to in terms of just providing a moment of like, whoa, this is cool, or this surprised me, or this really just is something I unexpected. And so I bet working in biometrics and applying those technologies and seeing people's reactions to how well it works or how fast it can do things is something that you've seen on your end as well.
It's a lot of fun.
That's great. And so, speaking of the future of things, are there any big features, anything on the horizon, any big things that you or Veridas is planning for that we should look out for?
Thanks for asking, Mark. Well, while I really can't give away any trade secrets away here due to the competitive nature of what we do, I can tell you this: digital identity wallets are an emerging trend that hold a lot of promise for the future. And these technologies aim to provide individuals with more control and ownership over their personal data, allowing for a more secure and seamless digital interaction across multiple platforms. Another thing that we're now seeing on the near horizon is age verification. That's one of the things that we are launching here in the next couple of weeks by helping people verify whether you're 18 and you can go into a casino, or maybe you're 21 and you can go purchase liquor in certain states. So age verification, and that's also really also used for loan applications and things like that. And of course, Veridas offers our newly released and patented facial biometric QR code. And this is actually another one of those wow moments, Mark, in that when I show people this, they kind of shake their heads and they're like, wow, no way. So remember when I told you that we don't keep an image and we don't actually take a picture of someone, but we turn that picture into that mathematical vector? Well, what we then can do almost immediately is turn that vector file into your own personal QR code, right? And that allows our users to maintain what is known as their self-sovereign identity. So that QR code remains with me, and all our platform is then doing is looking at that QR code and looking at your face and saying, yes, you are the person in the QR code. Pretty interesting stuff.
That's really interesting. And age verification, I'm sure you can't dig into it now. I'd be just curious to know how that would work. I'm sure as a 21-year-old or as you get older, there's just, so many ways to misidentify someone's age, right? Like I might look younger than I am, or someone might look older than they are. So I'd be curious to learn as you roll that out how that tech works and how that can be applied in a safe and secure way.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a chance to come on the podcast again someday soon.
Yeah, we can do an update and a follow-up. But
Sure.
that said, I know we've covered quite a few topics on today's call. Thank you for breaking things down for our audience in a way that they can easily understand. We do like to wrap up these episodes with what we call our Majestyk Byte, or it's our key takeaway that our audience can walk away with. So, Mitch, can you share what your Majestyk Byte would be for our episode today?
No, for me, Mark, it's about passion, energy, and enthusiasm. And I don't think you can generate that without love. You may have heard the expression, find a job that you love and you'll never work another day in your life. Now, I think you've been able to do that. I know I've been able to do it. But if you don't love it, find something that you do love and either go after it or build it.
I love when guests share bites that can be applied to any industry, any stage of your career. So thank you for sharing that. That's really relevant advice that I think anybody listening today can take away.
Sure.
So, Mitch, before we say goodbye, is there anywhere people can go to find out more about you and your company? Any links or websites that we can share with the team?
Well, anyone that wants to learn more about me personally can find me on LinkedIn. I think I have about 10, maybe 11,000 connections. So I'm pretty easy to find personally. But about the company, you can go to Veridas.com. You can go to YouTube and search Veridas. There are some amazing, very short, brief videos, some really cool stuff that once you see it, after you listen to this podcast, it'll all just come together in your mind. And then also LinkedIn, our company Veridas has the most up-to-date content for what's going on in facial biometrics and voice biometrics. I think it's always good to know who the thought leaders are in each individual industry and even like trade publications. And so for me, I like to follow biometricupdate.com. They have some of the best insights that I've found in the industry. And then Lee Odess is a guy that is a thought leader in the physical access control space. And then there's a guy called Ken Nosker, Nosker. He's over at Fulcrum Biometrics, and he is one of the pioneers in biometrics overall.
That is great. And I'm sure our audience will definitely appreciate looking into some of these thought leaders that you shared. Again, we'll link out to those as part of the podcast. And again, Mitch, thanks for being on the show today. It was great having you.
Thanks so much, Mark. It was great spending some time with you. Take good care.